Hey everyone, I want to introduce you in this interview to Tucker Boyle, who is a CES instructor, a Seminary and Institute guy. He teaches seminary at local high schools here in Utah County, also teaches Institute at Utah Valley University. And you consider this is a typical story, right? A guy that goes on his mission, loves the gospel, has a deep testimony, and wants to continue teaching. Well, Tucker took a different turn as he went back to school to earn a PhD, and he tells a story of how this spun him out into what he classifies as a faith crisis. Now, somebody who comes from this background of a very black and white belief, a belief, of certainty in the restored gospel, and how he navigated this and what others can learn from it. And this even branched out to, as he came through this faith crisis, he started the Harmony Roads retreats, where he takes a small group of people who come to his retreat center, and they will begin to process this experience of a faith crisis. Now, we often think about faith crisis on more of an intellectual level, or even a faith level, that something's off, like there's too much doubt in the mix, right? When in reality, there's a response that our body is having, and our nervous system is having a response when we go through a faith crisis, or we begin to question or doubt. And it's easy to say, well, just stop thinking that way, or don't read this and read that, right? But Tucker has a unique approach that I think will bless the lives of those leaders out there who are mentoring individuals through a process of, a faith transition, a faith journey. And how do we understand what's going on maybe a more nervous system level, and how do we work our way through it? So this is an important topic that we can't talk about enough, with so much, with people questioning their faith, and what do you do with that? And how do we do it as a community so that we don't make anybody feel othered? And so fantastic conversation that you will definitely enjoy. So please share this. Here's my interview with Tucker Boyle. All right, Tucker Boyle. You are, by day, you are Seminary Institute teacher extraordinaire. Is that right?
Well, not extraordinaire. I've never had that applied to me.
Well, today's the day.
Well, so. Thank you, Kurt.
How long have you been teaching?
I've been teaching for 24 years now.
Nice. And bounced around from high schools, or?
Yeah, a lot of different high schools, different assignments, always in Utah since I first got hired, yeah.
And it's been the dream? Like everything you hoped to be? Or?
I have loved it. There's been amazing days, and there are hard days too.
What's a hard day look like?
Ooh, hard day. Hard day is when it just feels like it's not landing, it's not connecting. Mm-hmm. And you feel like you have passion about what you want to have happen. What you imagined happening isn't happening. And you just have this fire in you, and you want the fire to catch, and it doesn't catch. And those are hard days.
So I was to ask you, so how many classes of seminary do you teach compared to Institute?
Yeah, right now I'm teaching 3 seminary classes and 2 Institute classes, and then I do some teacher training stuff as well. So
you're at UVU, Utah Valley University. Mm-hmm. You have an office there, and then you just sort of go to the high school as needed, or? Kind
of based at a local seminary here, Timpview Seminary, and then Utah Valley University. I go in evenings, and I have an online Institute class. So.
Oh, cool. So what do you think, what's your pulse right now on the youth, the young single adult demographic? Like, what are you seeing right now? What keeps you up at night when you think of that demographic?
I sleep pretty well. Honestly, I don't worry a lot about our youth and young adults. I just trust their goodness. I can see that just the divinity in them. I know a lot of people do worry about them a lot. Yeah. But what I'm seeing is just these good souls coming in to a complex world. And there's I think a lot of people talk about phones and media and things that get them. But I also just see a deep goodness in them that transcends those smaller concerns that come up for me. So I don't just to be honest, I don't worry a lot about them.
Great. That's encouraging. So if there's anybody out there worrying, take a breath. God's got them, right?
I really do feel like God's got them. I don't feel like there's, God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. I just feel like when we are worried about them, it's justified. And I think it's coming from a place of love and concern for them. But whenever I'm like in the spirit, in the flow, whenever I'm teaching and I feel like, oh yeah, this is happening, I never feel a sense of panic for them and for their eternal welfare. I just feel like all of this is part of what's supposed to be happening. We're here and we're on track.
Wonderful. Yeah. So I got connected. I forget. Somebody emailed me. There's so many people email me, recommend people. I don't know how we landed here, but nonetheless, it was all around this topic of, I don't know, faith crisis, faith journey, questioning faith. I know we have some buzzwords, some like some more than others. How do you frame as far as this work that you're involved in?
I'm fine with all of those. Yeah, whatever people need to use. Faith crisis oftentimes is a term that people use who are really in it and they're really suffering and it feels like a crisis. Yeah. So, and then some other words don't quite do it for them because they're like, no, this is a crisis. Like the world feels like it's falling apart around me. And so I allow people to use that word. Faith journey might feel better for some that are feeling like there's some bending and moving and there's some shifting underneath me. And I don't see what's ahead very clearly like I used to. And that's beautiful too. And I mean, all the phrases have validity to me, and however you want to use them, it's great.
Cool. So, and this starts from your own personal journey or crisis, or how did you define your own journey?
Crisis for sure. Yeah.
Tell us about it. How'd that go?
Well, I had been teaching seminary for maybe 15 years or something like that.
I mean, you're in it. Like you should know, right? Like,
oh yeah. I've got all the answers. In fact, this is funny, Kurt. I actually said this to my wife probably about 10 years ago. I remember coming home and being like, "Hey, hon, I think I have an answer to every question that anybody could ever ask me."
Uh-oh. And that's when it began.
Yeah, and angels above us are silent notes taking. It's like, okay, it's time. Ring the Tucker Boyle bell. We're gonna bring in some complexity. And around that same time of utter confidence, which is so embarrassing to say out loud, I started feeling like, well, I want to see what things look like from other perspectives. And I came across, a friend came to me and said, hey, let's do this PhD together at a evangelical university online.
What could go wrong?
Yeah. I was like, that sounds amazing. I did want other perspectives. I knew that I was living in all LDS type of context.
And are you BYU grad? Or?
Yeah, BYU grad, bachelor's and master's from BYU.
Okay.
And just everything was church for me. You know, all of my friends are church members. All of my work isn't the church, you know. Every day of the week it's church because I'm teaching seminary, and then Saturday it's BYU sports, so that's church too.
That's right.
It's 7 days a week. This is all church, and I loved it and found a lot of meaning and purpose in it, and yet there was something in me that was like, hey, let's find another perspective. How are we seen from the outside? And I was really fascinated by the idea of culture. I started, hearing people say things like, well, we all have a culture around us, but we don't recognize it. It's like fish in water. If you asked a fish, how's the water? They'd be like, what's water? Right? And I was fascinated. I was like, so what's our culture in contrast to other cultures? And I got curious about that. And so one of the things I wanted to do was experience other cultures. So I got into this PhD program, and the emphasis of it was a leadership program, but the emphasis was in biblical studies. So I started taking Bible classes from pastors from other churches, and it was really fascinating to see different personalities and angles. And it was challenging in some ways too, because there were some that were very dogmatic. There was like, no, this is the way it is. And there's some conflict and things.
And they weren't necessarily like attacking our church per se. They're just dogmatic in their own
in their own way. And so I felt attacked because I was like, no, this is how it is, right? And
suddenly there's a contrast there that, well, I kind of see where he's coming from, but
Yeah. And during that degree, the degree portion of it, I could see where they were coming from some degree, but it was kind of a little pat on the head. Oh, that's really cute that you believe that, right? And so as I got toward the end of my degree, I decided, well, the opportunity came up to write my dissertation on Joseph Smith and Joseph Smith's leadership style.
Which I think we need to do another episode about that.
Would be really interesting to talk about. But well, let me go back. As I came across that idea, I was like, well, what if I get assigned a supervisor, a chair, dissertation chair that's going to be antagonistic and is going to attack Joseph Smith? And yeah, I want to study Joseph and learn more about him and his leadership, but maybe not in this context. So I went to the Provo Temple to pray about it, and I prayed about it, and I had this moment of clarity and peace. I just felt like God was saying, yeah, do that for your dissertation. And so I was so excited. I told my wife, hey, I'm going to put in this proposal. And then I put in the proposal, and all the fears started, like, what if I get assigned to this certain professor that's out there that I was scared of, a certain pastor that I've been avoiding my whole degree?
Yeah.
And what if he gets assigned to you? And just all the what ifs. And sure enough, he did get assigned to be my dissertation chair. And all of a sudden, the background music got dramatic in my life. And I wrote my first chapter and sent it in. And he sent it right back to me with so many corrections on it, saying, Tucker, you have rose-colored glasses on. All you're telling me about is the good things about Joseph Smith. If this is going to be a balanced academic paper, you have to read about what all his critics are saying. You have to read about what all his critics are saying, all the other viewpoints. And I was seized with fear. I was like, that qualified, everything that he was saying qualified under the title of anti-Mormon literature that I'd always been warned about. And in my mind, the devil was the author of all of that, right?
Yeah.
And so I'd avoided it with fear my whole life. And out of faith, I had avoided that. But I was in this place where here's my chair saying, to move forward, you have to dive into that. And so I just decided to rely on that answer that I got in the Provo Temple and go forward with faith. So I'd get up in the morning, study my scriptures, pray my hardest, try to get the Spirit, and then I would dive into primary sources. And holy cow, Kurt, it was so challenging. I had a really, probably more than most, black and white mindset. Very binary, like us versus them. The world was clearly divided between the good guys and the bad guys in my mind. And all of a sudden that started to take hits as I would read both sides of things. And I was like, wow, that's a perspective I'd never considered, and I'd never seen it that way. And it got really scary at the same time that I was kind of learning and growing in other ways. And I was in the bishopric, my home ward. I was a principal at a seminary, and started to have more questions. And I'll say it started to get more, how about I frame it like this? Like I would say I had these different pillars of my testimony, of my beliefs, that I was like, okay, so this one over here is kind of shaky, but I've still got these and it's okay. But as I would continue my research, like a pillar would kind of dissolve. And I'd be like, oh, yeah, we're okay. We still got this and this and this. And then something else would dissolve. And so I started to see kind of like things fall apart. And there was one particular day that stands out in my memory that I was in the BYU library, and I had one pillar left that I was just clinging to because I didn't know what I would do without it. And I don't remember what I was reading. I don't even remember what the pillar was, but I remember it dissolving. And all of a sudden I went into this utter chaos. It felt like a free fall psychologically. And I was gripped with fear. And I remember exactly where I was sitting in the BYU library as I looked up around me and I saw these BYU students and senior couples that were doing family history work. And I had this question ring from my depths that was, are we all wasting our time?
Wow.
And I couldn't avoid that question. It was just ringing in my head, and I didn't have answers for it. And I got up and went home. At the time, I didn't tell my wife what I was going through because it was so scary. I'd seen people around me go through things like this, and I had seen marriages fall apart. I had seen people that worked for the church that were questioning, that ended up stepping away from their jobs. And I was wondering, well, how do I support my family if this...
Yeah, there's so many things on the line.
Yeah, and my community, my friends, like everywhere I looked, I was like, I can't see a way forward if I don't have my pillars back, my steadiness back. And so it was very, very scary.
Yeah. So in that moment, you're leaving the library. Are you like cognitively thinking, I don't believe anymore Joseph Smith was not a prophet? Like, was it just sort of, you're in free fall? You weren't sure of anything at that point?
Yeah, I would say I wasn't sure of anything. Like during all of this, like, I don't believe anymore, something like that. I could start to see my own black and white to some degree. It was like, well, maybe this isn't an all or nothing thing, but all of my all or nothings, all my pillars were based on all or nothings, right? And so as those fell apart, I was like just grasping for anything. And so...
And could you maybe paint that picture a little bit more clearly? Because obviously that's another 10 episodes on a different podcast of breaking down these pillars and the nuances or whatever. But was it maybe explain just generally those, like, what do those pillars look like? And then how are they dissolving? Yeah.
Great question. So basically, a pillar could be something like, well, I remember having an experience with this, like a spiritual experience that confirmed to me that such and such is true. Like, let's take Book of Mormon or something like that. I've had many spiritual experiences with the Book of Mormon that for me, I was like, oh, I felt the Spirit. That means this is true. And when I said this is true, that means everything about this is true and it's infallible and there's nothing to poke at, right? That's off limits now. And then as I'm doing my research, I'm like, oh, I had never seen this from this angle. Maybe it's a historical fact, or maybe it's an angle or a way of holding it. There's so much, we could get into details about it. Yeah. But all of a sudden, the all or nothing, the infallibility of things. Right. Maybe a way I would say it is this. When I would feel the Spirit, I would attribute divinity to that thing. And all of a sudden I started to see humanity where I had seen divinity before. And that just scared me completely because in my mind, if there's humanity there, there's not divinity there, which, talking to you right now, spoiler alert, I can now hold and see divinity in humanity. They're not opposed to each other necessarily. They can be hand in hand. Yeah. So.
And this, we have a strong tradition in sort of these pillars, this pillar dynamic of like, if the Book of Mormon's true, then Joseph Smith was a prophet, then, the restoration, then, right?
Yeah, it's kind of almost a domino.
Right, which isn't necessarily a bad way to look at it. I mean, I think that makes sense. But then when the nuance gets in there, then you're like, well, wait a minute, if 3 steps back or 3 thens back, if that suddenly falls apart, then what does that mean to the next? And then you're like, wait, I'm trying to keep it all together type thing, right? And that humanity thing is really interesting because it really goes to the concept like God does his work through humans, through mortals. And, pick your issue, like my mind immediately goes to like the translation process of like, we want a reality where Joseph Smith sat down with the plates, put on the Urim and Thummim, word for word, translated this ancient text, and that was it.
Yeah, and there's no Joseph involved, right? It's like a transcendent thing.
He was just there kind of cranking the wheel type thing.
That
when in
feels
reality,
amazing, right?
There's a lot like, well, actually this stone in the hat kind of works. I'm going to try that. Oh, this is working. And so now it's like the humanity's there, but all we're saying is it was done through the power of God, right? We don't know, like, and so when it says compass in there and we're like, oh, I don't know, that word didn't exist back in the day, right? But that's the humanity in there, because that's the word that Joseph Smith would have understood or been able to articulate.
Yeah.
You know? That's just, and there's a ton more, many more layers to that dynamic, but that's maybe an example of like, you're like, whoa, no, I don't like this humanity in here. Let's get back to the divinity, because that's the safe place.
Yeah. And if I can add this in, like what you just did was very, methodical and looking clearly at it, kind of objectively. And what I was experiencing was terror and fear and the inability to do that for a while, if that makes sense. So, let me tell an experience in church that like upped the pressure for me. So I was in my ward bishopric and I was asked to lead a fast and testimony meeting. And so I was wondering, like, what do I bear testimony of? I want to be authentic. I don't want to get up there and just say things that I've said in the past that I'm not feeling right now. So I got up and I said, I'm working on a graduate degree right now about Joseph Smith and early church history. And it's way more complicated than I ever thought it was. But I believe that God can help us do things that feel impossible. And that was the end of my testimony that day. And I went and sat down feeling really good about being authentic, right? And a well-meaning ward member got up right after that and said, and bore testimony, I know without a shadow of a doubt that Joseph Smith is a prophet of God and that church history, this and this. And as I listened to it, I was like, oh my goodness. I think he's bearing testimony against me. That was the thought that came up for me. Or maybe even, and then maybe the next thought right after that was, Tucker, you don't belong here anymore. And at the time, I just accepted that thought as true. I was like, oh my goodness, maybe I don't. And the next person that got up said something very similar. And what I was hearing was, Tucker, like if you're not in this place of certainty, it's not welcome. Your uncertainty, your doubts, your questions aren't welcome here. And it was a wild experience. Church had always been such a safe, beautiful, comforting place for me. And all of a sudden it turned into a very uncomfortable place. One way that I might say it is, I went to church for comfort and stability and security and to feel better about life. And so if we're going to use nervous system terms, I went there for co-regulation. It was something that helped me feel safe and secure. And all of a sudden, I experienced just the opposite. And I would walk into the same church, same wonderful people, same ward, and it was exactly the opposite. I felt dysregulation there. What would happen, I would go into fight or flight mode, if we're talking about the nervous system, right? Which everybody listening knows what that feels like, right? You're just trying to survive a moment, and maybe your heart starts pounding and your breathing gets shallow. And this was my church experience. Right. And so what was safe became unsafe. What I used to go to feel comfort now was super uncomfortable. And I felt like I didn't belong. Yeah.
And I guess I'm just thinking of leaders who are listening to that. It's not that we need to then, tell members to water down their certainty testimonies per se. They're just expressing it differently, right? I think that what's important is to recognize the constant battle that people are in, because it wasn't, we're not putting that member at fault for,
right.
But it was like, you see how the adversary begins to thread his message in there of, Tucker, you don't belong here, right? That was the point that we need to be aware of, that there's probably others that are feeling that, regardless of what we're doing or the type of culture and community we're gathering, just assuming that's happening in the room so that you can, then you have data to work from, right? Or you assume that data is there to work from, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And as I look back on it, from my perspective now, I can see that the problem wasn't actually the member getting up and bearing testimony like they had always borne testimony. The problem was that there was a thought that came up inside me that was like, Tucker, you don't belong here, and that I believed it. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, this whole space shifted from into a place where I was kind of a victim.
Right.
Now, there are things that we can all do, right? But one thing that I can do as I look back at my story is like, oh, yeah, I just need to be aware of my own thoughts in the space. And I needed to be able to regulate my own nervous system rather than rely on everybody else to say what I needed them to say for me to be okay.
So this is really helpful framing to see it, is because you referenced the nervous system. So many members, maybe more orthodox members who maybe they do believe they have an answer to every question, right?
Yeah.
They see it more as like, can be interpreted like this is a spiritual problem, right? Or even a knowledge problem. Like, Tucker, like if I can just explain to you, if you just understood further enough, you'll be okay. And so we go into the space of like, let's give them information, right? Like, actually, let me tell you the books I'm reading about Joseph Smith, right? Like, your cute PhD is great, but this, right? and when in reality, it's really helpful to see like people are having, we're a constantly operating nervous system, right? And just because we're at church doesn't mean that that nervous system isn't going to be triggered or activated. Right. And again, just recognizing and being aware that some people are responding to things differently, not because that thing of its nature is bad or you did it wrong or whatever. But hopefully if we're aware of that, we can catch people and then help them regulate the best we can. Right.
Absolutely.
But again, I appreciate that you're also saying it's on me. Like, I'm in charge of my nervous system.
Yeah. Right. Ultimately, it's all on all of us, right? Like as individuals to grow into that ability to self-regulate rather than being dependent on others to regulate. But it takes work. It takes time. And I want to acknowledge as well that the people that got up to bear testimony, they were responding to their own nervous systems as well, right? Point. Like, can I just step out of this and tell a story before I got to this point? I remember somebody coming to me not long before I went into my own spiral, but coming to me saying, hey, I'm reading all this stuff about Joseph Smith. And this is before I started my PhD. And I'm just having all these questions and doubts, and it's so scary and everything like that. And this was my response. I said, why would you read that? Don't you know that's from the devil himself? And that was my nervous system like kicking up, and I'm like, okay, fight or flight. We are going to fight and get this person back into the safe. And what it did to the person, I remember them like grabbing their head and saying, I know. And like all this shame coming over them of me saying that they're like following the devil right now. And I thought I was like doing the right thing. But what that did for that person is just ramp up the pressure. And maybe that's a short-term fix to help somebody stop reading something, but it's not a long-term solution.
Yeah. And another thing I want to maybe confirm with your knowledge of the nervous system and things, like where the nervous system, the way it responds is a result of the lifetime before it, right? Or the DNA that's involved, or there's so many
context,
variables,
culture,
right? Yeah. And we'll link to it in this episode, but I had when I was serving as bishop, one of my counselors went through a faith crisis and left the church, and I caused it because I say that in jest, but because I called him into leadership, so he felt like he needed to be the person who was able to stand at fast and testimony meeting and say, I know, but he couldn't do that. And so that dysregulation just pushed him down a slide of depression, right? Yeah. But it all came from when he went to law school at BYU, and one of his religion classes, he had to read Rough Stone Rolling by Richard Bushman, which, active member of the church. He goes through, I've read it.
Beautiful. That was a big part of my research. I really loved it. Yeah.
So I've read Rough Stone Rolling before this. I did not have a response to it. It didn't it didn't shake my faith. I was more like, oh, wow, I didn't know this about Joseph. This is really interesting. Going, where he read it and being like, wait, my faith is falling apart. Now, am I just more faithful than him? Did I figure out the recipe better than him? No, like we've lived two different lives where his nervous system is going to respond differently, not because he's less faithful to me. It's just the way he's put together, the way he's experienced life, where I responded one way, and that's just the way it is, right? And so, like I think that's important for people to realize that like nobody necessarily went wrong or read something of the devil the wrong way. It was just, that's mortality. We're in a fallen world and people respond differently. Their nervous system activates when I look at it and be like, Tucker, what's the big deal? But
absolutely. Yeah. There are different, triggers, I guess we could say, for our nervous systems for all of us, depending on our past experiences, our family and conditioning and everything like that.
Yeah. So where do you go from here? Like I mean, how do you start to climb out of this, or is there more digging that you did?
Well, there's definitely a lot more. I mean, this was intense for a long time.
And what year was this?
2018, 2019,
oh, wow, okay.
In there somewhere. 2020 plays into it. I mean, this whole experience, it's easier to tell a story about it than it is to like really map it out. Faith journeys, faith crisis. It's sometimes it's nonlinear,
right?
And there's a moment where it's like, boom, you're down in the depths, and then you pop out for a little bit and you're okay, and then something else triggers.
Yeah, but you can't necessarily go back in time and be like, this point, if I just would have turned left instead of right? It's not. Right. It's much different than that. Much more nuanced.
Yeah. And so, I was in some hard places, spiritually and mentally and emotionally for a long time. I would go to work and, be as faithful as I could to everything that I felt like was asked of me there, and then go to church. But the pressure and the questions, I just was having a hard time holding all of it. And man, we could just dive into this and do a lot more story to it, but let me just get to kind of the finish of my PhD, where, in an interesting way, I had kind of projected all of this pain toward this chair that was making me study all this stuff, right? And I just had the hardest feelings for him. And I remember one morning waking up toward the end of my degree, just so full of anger. Like, this could ruin everything in my life. Why are you making me do this? And I felt like he was of the devil, right? And I remember that particular morning still, doing my scriptures and prayers and all of the things. And that's one thing that maybe I'll point out here. Like, prior to this, my prescription for people that are struggling with faith is like, pray harder, study the scriptures more, go to the temple more, go to church, just church harder, and then you'll be okay, right? And I had never churched harder in my life than when I'm in the depths of this. And some of those things made it even more difficult. Like, I would open my scriptures and start reading something that before would have lifted me. And now, like, my mind is deconstructing all of this. Like, well, that's based on this assumption, kind of like you were doing earlier. Yeah. This pillar, this pillar, this pillar. And it would deregulate or dysregulate rather than co-regulate me like scriptures used to do. So, man, there was just nowhere to turn in all of this. And I was so angry at my chair. And so one morning I'm praying and I'm like, Heavenly Father, I know the Book of Mormon says that he that has the spirit of contention is not of me, but is of the devil, who is the father of contention. And he stirreth up the hearts of men to contend with an anger one with another. And I'm like, but I definitely have the spirit of contention. I have no idea how to let this go. How can I have the spirit in my life when I feel this way toward him, when all this is going on? And I got in my car and I put on a talk by Elder Uchtdorf, and I was driving to work, and I remember exactly the line that he quoted. I don't remember which talk, but he says, if God is with us, who can be against us? And I had the most indescribable experience when I heard that. If God is with us. And I remembered that answer in the Provo Temple. Yes, Tucker, do this. And then I kind of saw my miserable life pass before my eyes after that point up till now. And I just sensed that God was with me the entire time. And that was a purposeful experience that God had given me to learn things that I couldn't have learned without it. At least not in that way. And all of a sudden, all of that darkness, all of that doubt, all of that space, everything just flipped, and I felt full of light and love. And I remember sitting at a stoplight, looking around, like, this world is so incredibly beautiful. And I would look at the driver next to me and be like, that looks like the kindest, most wonderful person I've ever seen. And look at that gas station over there. That's the most beautiful gas station of all time. And I went into a seminary building, and every kid I saw, I just wanted to go up and hug them. And I just loved everybody and everything. And simultaneously, I didn't have one answer to any of my questions.
Yeah.
I didn't have any answers, but it's like my heart blew wide open, and I just loved everybody. And that continued for a while for me. Like, I went home, it was still there. Like, I said to my wife, hon, like, if I feel this close to the Lord, if I feel this much love, I'll do this dissertation for the rest of my life. And she said, no, you won't. You will finish this thing and we'll be done with it. And, but that's how it felt to be so, I remember Joseph Smith's first written account of the first vision, when he says, I was filled with love for many days. And for about 3 or 4 days, I just felt like I loved everyone and everything. And then I went back to writing, had more interactions with my chair, and that beauty closed, and I went back to kind of struggle and crisis and things, and finished my degree and looked back on it saying, okay, so I'm done. What was that thing that I experienced? I didn't know the term faith crisis or didn't understand it. I had heard it.
So let me clarify. So when you had this like epiphany moment of overwhelming love, even though you didn't have answers, did you feel like, oh, I'm through it? I'm coming out of what that darkness I've been coming through? Or,
I thought I was during those 4 days, right?
Okay, yeah,
and I was like, oh, it's done. Like, the earth shall appear as the Garden of Eden. I'm in the Garden of Eden, it's all over. Okay. No longer fallen. And
you were at a place, I'm just fine without the answers, or I'm fine to just continue in my faith?
The questions didn't even, I wasn't even curious about them at the time during those 4 days.
Okay.
And then that kind of closes. The way I would frame that, it was a time where I perceived the world through my heart for 3 or 4 days, and I just felt love. And as that kind of closed, not that I purposely closed my heart, but it just kind of drifted away from it. And I'm guessing everybody's listening that has had some experience when, for whatever reason, your heart is just open and you just love everyone and everything. I think just divine gift. Sometimes when we're feeling the Spirit, you look at somebody that normally you're annoyed with and you just love them. You see divinity in. But I think sometimes we're granted those experiences to kind of just get a taste of God's perspective. But that's what I felt. And then as it closed and I went back to the dissertation, the mind kind of took leadership again and the heart took the back seat. And when the mind is first and the heart is second, things feel differently. And then I went back into the difficulty, finished, looked back at it saying, what just happened? I was like, well, I guess that was the devil, all of that darkness and everything. And I guess that was God telling me that, just don't worry about it, move forward. And there was a time where that's all I thought about it. And I was like, I don't know. And I started reading, and then I started reading books about faith crisis, faith journeys. And I was like, oh, I've been through a faith crisis. And I read about it, and it like opened up to me again. I was like, oh, I understand what was happening there. This was a period of challenge, of growth. And as I processed that, like the questions came back up that I had had, and also that experience, I would remember the love that I felt. And so I started to want to learn how to hold both of those at the same time. And for me, one of the answers was finding meditation. I learned how to meditate and to kind of step back from my worried, stressed mind and even stepped back from my emotions and be able to find peace even when I didn't have answers to questions.
Yeah.
And then I got passionate about how do I get back to feeling like that heart open, experience that I had. And I learned through meditation and other things to try to like live my life through the heart principally rather than living through the mind principally, where the mind wants to label and divide the world and everything like that into its categories, right? And that's probably what got me in trouble in the first place. But the heart can hold things that the mind can't hold, including questions, including humanity, and including difficulties in church, imperfections, and even, really difficult dynamics with church leaders, church members, with church history, with scripture, whatever it is. The heart can hold it, and sometimes my mind can't. So I've kind of learned to hold both together.
Yeah. And I wrote a whole chapter in my book about this, the dynamic of heart versus behavior. And we want to change the heart, and what comes first? A change of heart or change of behavior?
Yeah.
We sometimes think change of behavior will then change the heart.
Right.
And the scriptures, there's more examples of the heart changing and then behavior changing.
Absolutely.
And there's more reference of God's coming for our heart rather than our behaviors, right? Not saying the behaviors aren't, that we just dismiss them, right? And I've noticed sometimes just in seasons of my life or just how the week's going, some weeks I need just more heart than, practical cognitive scripture or a Hebrew translation, right? But other weeks I'm like, I really want to dig into that, right? But sometimes our brain can be sort of a dominant force because the heart's so nuanced and it's hard to, and you think about the, what do we measure to as far as like Temple recommends and understanding someone's level of spirituality? Well, the heart's too hard to measure. There's no dipstick you can pull out of the heart. So we default to behaviors, and it's not the best indicator, but it's sort of what works. So, are you honest in your dealings with your fellow man type thing, right? We go to the behaviors. And then we try and fix every problem or question through the behaviors or through the mind type of thing, right? And that gets us into trouble, as your story and my story as well,
right?
It gives evidence. So
the heart is a tender thing, right? It's scary, and I think even culture, like modern culture, teaches us that the heart is kind of like a dangerous place to be. I think you asked earlier, what are you worried about? I think a lot of people worry about the youth, and I think all of us worry about the amount of escapism that we do in the world today, right? Where we have difficult feelings. So what do? We go to our social media, or we go to you might call it a buffer, something to get away from those difficult feelings, because the heart is scary. Like it can be a really hard thing to approach. And as I look back at scripture, like you're saying, and look back at Jesus, it seems like Jesus led with the heart and brought the mind along as well. We're not saying the mind isn't helpful, right? But the mind is a poor master without being in concert with the heart, right? But Jesus had this way of leading with the heart, just being present right here, right now, seeking connection with people around him, and not letting the analytical mind take over and do its division and its boxes and its us versus them type of thing. Jesus was an example of somebody that lived from that heart, and that's amazing. And that's something that I'm striving to learn myself. Yeah.
Did you feel like, it seems like as many of us go through these types of experiences, journeys, crises, however you want to frame it, we are sort of hoping for a moment that'll get us back to the certainty space, right? And so we're hoping then finally angels descended from heaven. I saw the plates. Joseph Smith himself testified to me. Now I know, right?
Right.
But it's always surprising how God leads us to a place of maybe a more complex way of categorizing the gospel, seeing the gospel, and seeing the humanity in the gospel type of thing. Was there like a moment where you thought, I think I'm through this? Or did you wake up and like, actually it's been 6 months and I'm doing pretty good? Like, what was that like? And I hate to assume that you're through it or that you see yourself that you're through it, but maybe you do. I don't.
Well, I mean, through this, if it's through something back to the way I used to see things, like when I talk about this, let me introduce an analogy that's been helpful for me. It's a music analogy of melody, dissonance, and harmony. And as we grow up as church members, we learn the melody, and we learn to sing in unison, and everybody's singing the same note. And
we
that feels
are as
so good.
the armies of Helaman.
There you go.
Let's sing it together.
That's right. And it's so beautiful to sing that with your heart and to feel the solidarity. And sometimes people go their whole lives singing that, and that's beautiful, and that's their path. And then some people experience a time of dissonance where singing that melody for some reason is feeling off and is not resonating the same way. And then the nervous system kicks up and you're in fight or flight, right? And it's not comfortable. And that can be a super challenging, difficult time. And it can be a time that leads you toward resolution or harmony, the ability to harmonize with melody rather than go back to a melody. And I would say that's where my journey has led me. I'm not saying that's how everybody's journey has to go, but I don't see things the way I used to. I don't see the world at all the way I used to. And I'm super grateful for it. Like my faith crisis, I would say, is the experience I'm most grateful for of anything I've been through in my whole life, because it's produced more growth. I feel more love for people. I feel more connected.
You are a new creature, you would say?
I would hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot to improve on, but, and to me, to use the Garden of Eden as an analogy, a metaphor here, like there was cherubim and a flaming sword put there for me not to go back to the way that I saw things.
Oh, wow.
Like there was no going back. That's what caused the fear, right? It's like, no, I want to get back in there. Please, can I get back into that melody that I was feeling? And there was no way back. And so that's where I had to learn my own self-regulation. I still attend church and participate in meetings, and sometimes something comes up, right? That I'm like, oh, that's uncomfortable. I don't know about that. And I have to do my self-regulation. I start to, do things that help me come to a place of leading with the heart rather than the mind, and getting back into a place of contention and tension and things like that. And it's just part of my new way of being in the world, I guess.
Yeah. So, man, I'm curious from that standpoint, like, because I guess I don't want others interpreting that you're like, you have this like new age faith now, and you're just like, you show up differently, but I don't know, like you're still a faithful, like card carrying member that teaches seminary, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, like, what does that look like teaching seminary or teaching institute? Because I remember being in seminary. I had this teacher named George Masters, and he was this ancient guy that knew everything. And I loved showing up early to class, and I would just like throw a question at him, and he'd like get his quad and, flip open to something and have an answer for it. And I was just like, that is so cool. It's like a magic trick, and so in seminary, we're so worried about this rising generation that we want to dig them so deep in certainty that they can never escape it, right?
Yeah.
That we want to put cherubim and the flaming sword on the other side of the gate so they can never leave Eden, know? But that's just not what mortality does, right? And so what does that look like, teaching seminary? I mean, because I wonder, are parents nervous that this guy who's been through this, faith crisis and meditates, he's teaching my, like, what does that look like?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Maybe they will be after this podcast.
Sorry, I lost your job, Tucker.
Thanks for planting that out there. This is what we do in seminary. We help students become deeply converted to Jesus Christ and His restored gospel, right? And I am completely passionate about helping the students become tied to the Savior Jesus Christ, to learn to have their own personal experiences, to learn to open their hearts, to learn to be able to navigate difficult things that are surely coming in everybody's life. And I'm not talking about faith crisis only, but everybody faces complexity. Everybody faces dissonance, right? In some way. And that's what we do in seminary. That's what I do in seminary. That's what I do in Institute, is try to help them have direct experiences where they're feeling their own divinity, they're feeling close to God, they're feeling tied to Christ, they're feeling the deep truths that you can find in scriptures and in the restoration that will get them to that deeper place that I experience when I meditate, of this unshakable, deep, spiritual divinity that's in me, in you, in everybody that we know as children of God. And I think that's what everybody wants for their kids, is to have that type of relationship with the divine, so that when they see the human, they're not shaken out of their boots. Right. And I hope that's what people want.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's not so much about certainty as it is about that regulation and that relationship.
Yeah.
Because it's like when we have deep relationships with people, we're more willing to see their humanity and be okay with it.
Absolutely.
And regulate that, right?
Yeah.
And that goes for how we interpret and step into the gospel.
Yeah. There's, another analogy, so many analogies today, but another one is like our own relationships, like in a marriage relationship. There's the honeymoon phase where everything is awesome, to quote the Lego movie, right? And there's everything's going great. But to mature into relationships with a person, you're going to come into complexity. You're going to have to learn how to work through things that you didn't see in the honeymoon phase, to get into the deeper relationship where it's more stable, more solid, less shakeable than it is. And it's the same with our relationship with the gospel. Oftentimes when we get into that dissonance, we need to like dig down deep and find the divinity in places where we're only seeing humanity, perhaps, so that that's not as easily shaken. Yeah.
So in that, state, I'm just curious, like, because as church leaders, I want to be the George Masters who can just like open the quad and answer a question, right? And I think, it's become common advice to not be afraid to say, I don't know, to some questions. But I mean, how do you respond to sincere questions? Because we do want to even give the nuanced answer of like, well, I get that point, but if you look at it this way, then you're okay.
Yeah.
Like, is there any way that you would, that we can better, teach the gospel, and we want to instill faith without the certainty model pushed on them too hard?
Yeah, that's an important question. For me, I think that questions are an opportunity for us to reflect this question back as an opportunity for somebody to grow spiritually. Let me describe what I mean by that. So I was called as a YSA bishop not long after, the throes, the hardest parts of my
God
faith
is
crisis.
on a journey with you, man. This is awesome.
Yeah, and that was an adventure too, right? Working through things still, and I'm the one up there presiding. But as kids would come into my office and be like, "Man, Bishop, I'm really struggling with this. Can you tell me what you think I should do in this situation?" And it's this moment where it's like, oh, you came to the right place.
Behold my wisdom.
Yeah, right. And it's tempting to just say, oh, I had just had an idea. I had a story. I had my experience. And I learned to kind of hold back and see this as a chance to help them come closer to God themselves. And so sometimes I would say something like, well, now I could give you what I think. And if I tell you what I think and then you go and do that and it ends up not working out, what's going to happen? Then
they'll doubt you.
Yeah. And if I can tell you what I think and then you go out and it works and it's great, what are you going to want to do?
Tell me more. Right?
Come back to me. Yeah. Again, right? And both of those are opportunities or to tie them to me but not necessarily strengthen their own individual connection to God.
Yeah, so true.
And so what I would try to do is say, well, what are you feeling God call you to do? And there was always a moment of pause after that question. And it was always so beautiful and sacred to see somebody pause and like go inward, feel like try to open that spiritual heart that receives answers and promptings. And sometimes they'd say, I don't know. I need some time to work with that. Maybe I'm going to go to the temple. Maybe I'm going to do this. But I would say, I don't want to take this opportunity for you to grow closer to God from you by giving you what I think.
Because you don't want them to grow closer to you.
Yeah.
You want them to grow closer to God.
Yeah. And so these questions that people come with, they're opportunities. Every question is an opportunity to direct them to their own spiritual journey, to tie and bind them closer to God.
Yeah.
And if we can help be part of, it is tempting to open up the scriptures and be like, ooh, watch this verse, right? And say it and get them, wow, that's amazing. You know the scriptures really well. And what just happened? The glory came here. That's not where it belongs, right? But if we can use it, what are you feeling? Maybe search your scriptures for that. Maybe, but I'll usually listen to the student and try to find out how do they connect to God and help them open up those channels and become more confident in their own connection.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm just the natural man in me wants to scream out, but Tucker, what if they make the wrong decision? Or what if they misinterpret the Spirit and then they go down a path and, but we really have to have faith in the process. Like when we say we believe in the gospel, this is what we're saying we believe in, is that they can interpret the Spirit even when maybe they misunderstand it. I don't know,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they will, and we will misinterpret things.
Yes.
I really think we're all human.
Yeah.
But when we misinterpret things and we fall down, that's when we learn to interpret things, right? Like we get back up and like, oh yeah, that wasn't the Spirit, was it? Or that wasn't the right thing, was it? But I think that's the whole point of earth life, is to be here learning for ourselves. That great line from Joseph Smith to his mother after the Sacred Grove. I think this is all like pointing back to the Sacred Grove experience for each of us, is these complexities, this dissonance, these difficulties that we're all going through. It's all pointing us back to come to God, strengthen that relationship, and learn from that experimenting. With that direct connection with God.
That's so good. So at some point you start having retreats.
Yeah.
Tell us, where does that enter your story?
Well, I have a little nonprofit called Harmony Road Retreats, where we host retreats for people that are in faith crisis or on faith journeys that need a safe space. Like we've talked about, sometimes when you're dysregulated at church or certain situations where you're not feeling safe anymore. What I experienced is in the throes of my faith crisis, I needed two really major things. I needed people to talk to that were going to, that I wasn't going to activate their nervous system by talking to them, that were okay talking through really difficult things. Not necessarily to answer my questions, but just to validate that the space that I'm in, the pain that I'm feeling is real. So I needed people to talk to, a safe space. And I needed some people that were maybe a little bit further along this journey than I was, so I could feel like there was a way forward. Because in the middle of faith crisis, it feels like like you're falling backward. And I needed to have some mentors, right? And so that's why I created Harmony Road Retreats with some other friends and volunteers, where we create a safe, compassionate space so people can come wherever they're coming from. It can be people that have left the church, can be and that have no desire to come back. It can be people that are in the church and want to stay, people that are wondering if they should leave. What all of us need is a really safe, compassionate space to talk through that. And then the other thing that we do is we help people learn how to regulate their own nervous system. How to create an inner safe space, even when you feel like you might not be in an outer safe space. Some people leave the church, and some people have a really hard time with relationships with family after that, because that internal regulation, right? Family used to be a safe space, and now it doesn't feel safe anymore. I'm sure many listeners have family members that, like, there's been a connection lost there. And so whatever people choose to do on their path, to go or leave the church, everybody needs these tools in order to navigate the complexities of these things. And so we try to give them an outer safe space and teach them to access this inner safe space, this inner sanctuary. I call it an inner harmony, so that they can make their decisions in life from a place of inner peace, even if their outer circumstances aren't ideal.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Was there a point where, because you talk about the nervous system things, like that sounds very like clinical or like scientific, like at what point did you kind of insert that or put that into context?
Oh yeah. A long time after I went through my own experience, I had no feeling. I just thought that the world was ending. Right. But, later on, I'm like, oh yeah, there's these different levels of the nervous system. In fact, I'll give a quick summary. Have you ever heard of the polyvagal theory?
No.
It's a scientific theory that says there are three major states of the nervous system that we all experience. There's the open connecting state. It's called the ventral vagal state. And it's when we're able to connect with each other, we can feel connected with God, like the world feels peaceful. It's just the state that we all love being in, right? State of thriving. And then the next state up is called, is when we're in fight or flight. And nobody likes to be there, right? Like the world seems scary and threatening. And then there's a higher state that where we go into a freeze mode. We just freeze up. The body feels like it's actually preparing for death, right?
Oh, wow.
And that's really intense and more rare. But as we learn to like see our own nervous system, we can actually take care of it and be like, oh, I'm in fight or flight right now. Here's some practices I can do to come out of fight or flight, so then I can be in the open connecting state again. And the reason why this has been super helpful for me is because in church, I interpret it as like, I don't belong here. And maybe there's no truth here, because I'm not feeling the spirit anymore. When you're in fight or flight, you don't feel the spirit the way that we're used to feeling it. And so we might even say that a lot of faith crisis is actually nervous system crisis. It's you're in a state of threat, and so you can't feel God. And you may think that you've lost faith altogether, but what you've lost is connection right now, because your body is trying to protect you from threat.
And your confirmation bias is saying that's because God was never there. Yeah. That's why I'm not feeling it. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow.
And there are shifts in beliefs around God often that happen. But what I believe is what I most wanted is just to feel that spirit, that connection, that safety that I felt before my faith crisis. I wanted that more than I wanted answers. And the cool thing is, if you learn to create this safe space to regulate your own nervous system, that comes back. And that feeling of connection with God and others, it's totally on the table again, even if there are still questions there, because you learn that those are not mutually exclusive. Yeah.
That's such a hope-filled message of, not that it's, just that easy, but
right.
Just to know that, we may not get back to that certainty place where you can know without a shadow of doubt, but you can definitely get back to a place of peace and connection and seeing the world as a beautiful place and feeling some level of divinity and encouragement, and that's a hope-filled message.
Absolutely. Yeah. And for me, that's what makes this life worth living, is those moments of connection and peace and beauty. And super grateful. Those kind of moments kind of happened to me before my experience, and now I'm like, oh no, I can actually purposely move myself into that space of connection and peace and openness to God.
So obviously we can't build Rome with one podcast here, but maybe just give us the general format or approach of what are you doing at this retreat, and about how many people do you get?
Yeah, we try to keep them pretty small, so that people feel safe enough and not lost in the crowd. 20 is probably the top of most of the retreats. And what we do is we welcome people in. We make it very safe. Just tell us what brought you to this retreat and share your story, your experience with this. And we're here to just listen and to respond with love. We're not here to judge or tell you what to do or anything. Some people might be like, wait, you're not trying to get them to stay in the church? And one of the key parts of making it a safe place is like, no, we don't have an agenda here. It's kind of like going to a therapist, and then the therapist, their job isn't to tell you what to do. It's to help you find within yourself a peaceful place that you can decide.
And that's the paradox. You can't have a hidden motive, because that's often what caused the problem in the first place.
Right.
Someone had a hidden motive, right? Yeah.
And so we let people tell their stories, and then we talk about the anatomy of faith crisis, what it looks like. This is something that's been happening since the beginning of time, and as long as there's been organizations and religion and things like this, people have been like, well, I went through this, and then there was this transition, and how do I grapple with this? And we kind of help them normalize their experience and see themselves on kind of this map and look how they can move forward spiritually and regulate their own nervous systems and come to that place where they have some tools going forward, so that no matter where they choose to go, they can come from a place of inner peace and harmony. So it's quite interactive, lots of discussion happening. Absolutely. You're not just at the front of the room pontificating your wisdom. Nobody would want that. And they're having an experience. Absolutely, very experiential. Right. We'll teach them to do some stillness practices, and it's a place of great connection, because a lot of times I found some people in my ward when I was going through my faith crisis, gratefully, that had been through something a little bit similar, and I would go on morning walks with them, and I would look so forward to those walks. Like sometimes I'd be on Monday and I'm just like, it's so dark right now. Like I can't wait till Thursday when I go on a walk with my friend. And those just felt like oases that like filled my battery and gave me some strength to move on. And these retreats are something like that, where you can come, you can feel filled up, you can feel like you're not alone, like you're not going through this isolated like we often feel in those spaces, and give you some strength moving forward and some tools as well. That's cool. And then we invite people to come back to connect with the community, and that's cool. And of course, we'll put the links and everything so people can check it out. And it's that here's the tricky thing is that not everybody can go through Tucker's retreat, right? Yeah. And also I'm sort of always on this quest of thinking, like, if the church and the community, can we really make it a space where healing happens, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that it needs to be we need to put the therapy industry out of business because we do church so good, but maybe we could at least help in a lot of these, nervous system related dynamics or whatever they're related to therapeutically. Mm-hmm. And so I guess my question is like, what can a ward council do to at least create some level of these dynamics so that maybe people can, find regulation in a church setting or in their family or whatever. And the first thing I'm hearing is, creating that safety, which is a tall order sometimes, right? And then you got people who are thinking, Kurt, come on, like church, we're there to learn doctrine. We got to read the conference talk, get into it. But I'm not satisfied with that as a community. Like I love the doctrine, I want to get to it, but I really feel like if we don't create a culture, we'll never truly get to the doctrine because people will feel unsafe or unregulated or these things, right? So what thoughts come to mind there? Well, can I direct us to a resource that's in the Gospel Library that I think is really, really beautiful and helpful? If you open up your Gospel Library and then go to topics and questions, at least this is where it is right now.
Okay.
2026. This shifts around sometimes, but there's a section called Seeking Answers to Questions. And that can be a good, helpful resource for people that are questioning and wanting resources from the church to help with that. And helping others with questions. So I'm going to click on helping others with questions. It's the second one on the list, at least right now. And it says introduction, and then there's 5 subsections. And just reading these is, I think, a really great outline that you could talk about with a ward council or have a 5th Sunday on or something like that. How do we help people that we love who are struggling with questions? And you can see we respond with love. We listen with humility. We trust in the Lord. We nourish our own faith, and we assist them throughout their journey. Notice like what's missing here. This is a very, it's not fix their problem for them, right?
Yeah.
Like find the right scripture. There was a talking conference that just popped into my head. There's general authority. I think it was an elder from the 70s that talked about his daughter going on a mission, and there was something tragic that happened, and his daughter was like, I got to find the perfect scripture to help this person with. And the Spirit told her, no, don't worry about finding the scripture. Just go be with them. And you can see in here, we're responding with love, listening with humility, trusting with the Lord. Sometimes we want to like get rid of the discomfort that we feel when somebody shares with us what they're going through by like giving the answer or sharing the scripture but this is just saying, no, let's just be with them. Let's mourn with those that mourn. Let's comfort those that stand in need of comfort. And if you don't mind, let's drill down into the trust in the Lord one.
Okay.
As we click on that, there's it's all so good. I highly recommend reading this, but this is something that I think can help all of us in our anxieties with helping those who are questioning. Go down to the bullet where it says, trust that God is aware. And I know there's a lot of fear and panic about the family, the eternal nature of the family, like somebody leaves, what's going to happen in the next life. There's all kinds of questions that come up about this, but let's just read this. Trust that God is aware. The Lord desires the growth and happiness of every human being, including that person who is struggling, who seems to be without hope, who has all the questions, who seems to turn their back on things. He encourages our sincere questions. He is aware of our struggles and weeps for our suffering. He will continue to extend love and assistance to people who struggle or step away from the church. And like that, to me, that's where I place my faith. Like God has got all of us. Though it looks like it's time for panic, it's time for alarm bells, God will continue to extend love and assistance to people in the church, out of the church. If there's people in your ward that are struggling and it seems like they have questions that are going to shake the community and cause all of this, God's got that. God's got the question. God's got the person. God's got the community. He'll continue to minister to all of us wherever we're at, in or out. And that alone, trusting in that God that we all know that is so good that we can't get out of his reach, that to me just rings so true and seems to be something that we can rest in when we otherwise want to panic.
Love it. Is there anything else any advice or you'd give to church leaders to further stimulate that or further stimulate just, that regulation?
Well, there's part of me that's saying don't give advice because then they want to come back to you for advice.
Right? Like,
yeah.
And that is one of the things. And this is, I guess, one thing I want to highlight is that so many in our audience, and it's human nature. They sincerely want to be good leaders. They want to show up for these people who are struggling, and they're just like, all right, Tucker, what's the 5-point plan, right? And I get that those are, it's important to discuss best practice tactics, but one of the biggest lessons I've learned over my time, interviewing so many people and, being a student of leadership and culture development and these things is that life happens to us in experiences, or life wounds us in experiences. It can only be healed through experiences. And you look at your story, and some may look at it and be like, oh, well, we got to figure out where Tucker went wrong, and then warn people not to go wrong there. Don't go down this path.
Plenty of places, right?
Right. And maybe we want to find him and be like, we found 5 of them actually. And if Tucker would have just gone a different direction, he wouldn't have gone through this. But then you look back in hindsight, your story's so beautiful and it's so sanctifying. And you even testified here that you are a new creature. And there's no other like formula that would have gotten you there other than God picking up your hand in the Provo Temple and saying, let's go on a journey, right? It was that experience. And so the best advice I get is from, my therapist friend, Steve Shields. He's like, if you want to be a leader, a great leader, do your own work, right? And so many of us, like my mind goes to this, I'm an elders quorum president. We had a regional, a bunch of stakes got together, all their ward council leaders, and they had a therapist from family services come, right? Seems like a great meeting, and I'm glad they did it. I appreciate it. And the therapist stood at the front of the room, and there's probably 300 church leaders in Utah County area. They're sitting like, teach us, right? And I look around and I think, this meeting will do nothing for you until each one of you figure out how to do your own work, whether that's go see the therapist, go to the retreat, start that business that God's inviting you into, like whatever, like that is what will make you a leader. And then when you're in that state of, oh my goodness, Tucker is dysregulated, I need to create a safe space. You are the being that can do that, right? Anyway, but I do always sort of reach for these, like if there's any quick and fast things we can do.
Yeah. And I'm having a quote from Elder Bednar come to my mind. He says, don't make it into a formula, right? Have you ever heard him say that?
I haven't, but
and
that makes
sense. That's exactly what you just described. And I'm just going to echo that. I will say, instead of making it a formula of what to do, see if you can drop from the worries of the head down into the heart, that spiritual center where we connect to God and others, and trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not to your own understanding. And as we trust in God, trust in His love, trust in His ability to reach people that seem unreachable to us. And then I'll add, and as we assert our own love for people that wherever they are, if we can prioritize our love and connection with them, other things are going to be okay. They're going to work out. Sometimes when people come to me, what do I do? This child is leaving. I'll say, just make sure that relationship is the top of the priority list. I'll tell one last story. A good friend of mine that I work with, we had talked about faith crisis a lot. I had told my story, and he heard it, and people asked, well, what do we do to help other people? And then he came back after some of those interactions, and he said, Tucker, I had the most amazing experience with a family member this Sunday. Our family was gathered, and somebody announced to our family that, hey, we're leaving the church. And I went over to this family member, and I said to him, I want you to know that no matter where you go or what you do, in or out of this church, it will never affect my love for you. And his family member said, when you said that, that's the first time I felt like I could stay. He felt like the relationship wasn't dependent on a common membership or being in the same organization, but there was something eternal about that bond and that love. And I feel like that's what God and Christ have to offer us, is that type of love, that type of reach. And that's in all of us. If we can access that, if we can drop into that place where we can feel that love and connection for others, that's the hope. That's the Zion that's one heart and one mind. But in that verse, the heart comes first. The Lord called his people Zion because they are of one heart and one mind. And when it's in that order, things fall into place.